This is show number 1000, Rich.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it. We started, 1993?
1993,
It's
yes.
year now 2025, and this is actually our 1000th show. Who'd have thought we'd have come this far, Doug?
Well, this is what we're going to talk about tonight, is how we came so far, where we started out and how it all began. So I think that's a good topic for tonight, and how we got involved in this whole creation evolution issue. And it started out when I was doing some research in high school and in college, and I was...
Now you're talking more like 50 years ago.
Yeah, it was 50 years ago.
Yep.
Yes. 1967 when they
even more,
digging into this a little bit, and I really hadn't intended to dig into it. I was emulating the Miller-Urey experiment, and I said, well, if you can zap all these different chemicals and come up with amino acids, all you have to do is continue the experiment a little bit more and recycle them in and get them to connect into proteins. Well, it was that particular experiment was a successful failure.
Yeah, what'd you call it? We've done a show called about the brown sticky goo. Is that what it is?
Yeah, the brown sticky goo which was really the remnants of burning tryptophan and tyrosine.
Is that what it is? Okay. Yeah, he's the chemist of the group, I tell you. But Doug, you know, it's a funny thing. Because even you were raised in the church, and still there was this evolutionary thought process, or at least a willingness to think that could be part of how maybe things happened, as opposed to the biblical worldview, which is in 6 days, 24-hour days. He created it about 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, 6 to 10,000 years ago, depending on which framework you're using. But none of them were utilizing millions of years. So anyway, even back then, Doug, you were raised in a certain way that the world had not really come to an idea that biblical creation could actually be a real thing. I mean, the book had been written, and it was taking some things by storm, but I had not heard of it, and maybe you had heard by then. They're called the Genesis flood.
Yeah.
And that kind of changed everything in the modern creation movement. But our story, Lord, our story begins kind of, for me, in 1971. Yours, when did you... we were part of that movement called the Jesus Revolution.
Right, yeah.
Way back and for us, it was like the early 70s. I guess it started, if you saw the movie The Jesus Revolution, the late 60s, probably 67, 68 in California. But it was sweeping the whole country by storm. But you and I, Doug, very early on, you come and you got me. He's the one that got me to become a Christian. Well, the Holy Spirit's the one that did that. But he was using him, and he came over and very, very interestingly witnessed to me in different ways. But what I think is fascinating, Doug, is very early on, Doug, we wanted to do a movie about the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You want to talk a little bit about that?
No, it was the Western
Book of the Dead. That's what it was. Yeah, but wasn't it based on an Egyptian?
Well, it was sort of like a parody on that.
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
But what was that it was a parody on what the evolutionary scenario was.
Correct.
In 1967 was when I started to see the proof that the whole evolutionary scenario was nonsense, and so and that was part of the chemistry experience. So I really had no idea how to approach it. There was a preacher on the radio. His name is Herbert W. Armstrong.
Yeah, and at that time, the Radio Church of God or something was it?
And they were starting to. They were the only ones that I heard about who were really talking about the scientific aspect of things and how evolution doesn't work. And they had a book called The Theory for the Birds, which talked about birds, and then A Whale of a Tale, and they had some fun picture books that they would put out about how evolution really doesn't make any sense. And they actually pointed out some of the things that I found in my chemistry experiments, and it really showed me that evolution wasn't really a viable option. Now, I was a little bit of a quandary because I was starting on my chemistry degree in college, and I was getting disappointed in the chemistry degree because they weren't really allowing you to really do any valid research. They were just doing cookbook chemistry, and
yeah. Well, at that stage of the game, usually that's what they usually do. It's later on when
right.
they get to
so I had already had a taste of it, and I was bored, and I was disappointed with the way the things going. And then I discovered that they were teaching a lot of things about evolution that didn't make sense to me, and so I didn't have to take the natural science course because I waived it, but I was taking the hardcore chemistry stuff, and I was learning, the techniques of chemistry and everything. But I really was searching around for a professor that I could talk to about my doubts about evolution, and I came across a fellow by the name of Dr. John Moore.
Yep.
He was a professor of natural science, and he team-taught natural science with an evolutionist. And so I didn't take his class, at least not at that time, but I took it. But I just conferred with him to find out and pick his brain, and he introduced me to the Creation Research Society.
So that's where you got interested in them. Okay, yeah.
And so that was the type of thing that happened back then. And
how long is the CRS? How long have they been around? When did they begin? Do you
in
remember?
1963.
So they were actually 2 years after the Genesis flood was published. Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think that organization grew out of the American Scientific Association, or ASA, and
Okay.
but that was a mixture of evolutionists and creationists, and the creationists got a little bit disenfranchised with the evolutionists taking over the whole discussion.
Oh,
and
okay.
so that's really what happens, is that you get shouted down and name called, and it doesn't get very pleasant. And
No.
so that's the trouble with the whole debate that happens in the classroom. And I sort of was discreet in some of my
critiques.
Critique. I didn't really speak up. Okay. Here's the problem: is that the professor has authority to actually put his thumb on your career.
Yeah, in the sciences, it's Our friend of the show, we've had him on our show several times. In fact, we just had him on. Jerry Burb talks about the slaughter of the dissidents, and what's the other ones? The Criterion. He's written several books that deal with the scientific, really almost dictatorship. If you come out as a creationist, or creationary thing, you will be refused degrees and careers and appointments. You get fired from jobs. All of these things have happened to creationists. You'd think that they were doing something totally horrible, but to an evolutionist, that is totally horrible. And so,
it's challenging their worldview, and
yes,
you don't understand that there's worldviews involved. When you're talking about a theistic worldview versus an atheistic worldview, if you are an atheist, you're attempting to what I call Great White Throne practice. You're standing before God and explaining to him why he doesn't exist.
Well, yeah. The thing about it is, what's interesting is even evolutionists themselves have acknowledged this prejudice over the years. We've talked about it. Who's the guy who did the quote? We not that creation is not a viable option, but we cannot allow a supernatural foot in the door. Who's the guy? I remember who.
Richard Lewontin.
That's Lewontin. Oh, Lewontin. Yeah. Okay. And so that's exactly what it is. At least he's honest about it. But the problem is when they have the authority, as you did with your teachers, you have to kind of do an end run. And creation has been indefatigable in the sense of over the years they've written many volumes of books, treatises, scientific papers, and oftentimes they couldn't get peer reviewed because they would be accepted in let's say a Scientific American or the Journal of Scientific, they wouldn't be accepted, so they had to create their own, and this is probably how CRS got started, and from there we've had all kinds of things come up since then. Obviously, the biggest one right now, as far as creation, would probably be the Ark Encounter and Answers in Genesis.
Right. Yeah.
But before that, you had ICR, Institute for Creation Research, with Henry Morris and John Morris, as opposed to John Moore. And all these things were very influential in my development early on in my Christian life, which didn't really begin until 71, which is many years after year. You're talking about 1967.
Yeah.
And in 71, the world kind of came upside down. But even very early on, we recognized the creation evolution was a significant part of what was going to be a cutting edge. And I hate to use that trite expression, but it would be the dividing line, literally, between what kind of Christianity you're going to serve. Do you really trust the Word of God, or do you basically want to put external things into it and have that basically trump the Scripture itself? And these are the things that we are still arguing about even today. But that's why this show came around, Doug. Many years later, of course. But And so, you want to lead us? Where do you want to go from here, Doug?
Well, I remember we were doing a lot of creation seminars. I would take my film strips or videos that I had gotten from some of the fledgling creationist organizations and started showing them around to people. And Dr. Dave Williams, who was pastor at Mount Hope Church, he encouraged me to write a book. Why don't you write a book about this? And I hadn't thought about that, but he sort of motivated me to do that. And he also helped me, he wanted me to edit his book. He has had a book on pace-setting leadership. And so I ended up editing that book. And so that was a start of my writing career. I ended up writing Revolution Against Evolution and published it in 1986. And then in 1993, I published the second edition.
Right.
That first edition, I had 2,500 copies of that book, and it wasn't that pretty of a book. The second edition seemed to be a lot more professionally.
It looked a little slicker. Yeah, first of all, it was an obvious self-published book, but the content in it was good. I did, I did a lot of the illustrations for that book at the time. Yeah.
And I remember that there was a fellow at Michigan State University who picked up that first book and considered the arguments in it, and he became a Christian and a creationist as a result. And his name was Dr. David DeWitt. He got his PhD. He got his specialty in. He studied Alzheimer's disease and now works for Liberty University as but he's written a number of books as well. And he came by one time and spoke at one of our groups.
He did.
And thanked me for the book. And so it's had some little amount of impact, I guess.
Yeah, we continued to do seminars even after we did launch our TV show, which was. Do you want to get to that, Doug?
That was kind of a interesting thing. There was a lady who had a TV show on public access in East Lansing, and it was called The French Connection. And her last name was French, and I think she only had. Maybe done only one or two shows, but she interviewed us, and at the end of it, we wrapped it up and everything, and they said, well, maybe you guys ought to do your own show. And I said, looked into that and
did the training,
and back then it was on 3/4-inch tape.
Yeah,
and you had the linear editing done tape to tape. And it was not the easiest thing to do.
This was 1993, right, Doug?
Yeah, and so later on we And so that was when we did our first episode. I think it took us about 6 months before we actually had an episode.
So I don't know, but it was a while. We were learning the ropes. So like everybody has to do that. So yeah.
But back then too, it was something where you had to do the editing in the studio using your equipment, and it was not as easy as it is today. And so we did some interviews of leading creationists. One of the things that doing a TV show, it gets you noticed by some of the people in the field. So we interviewed, I think one of the first ones was Dr. Richard Bliss.
Yeah, when was that, 1994,
1994, yeah.
Yeah.
And he was doing a seminar at Maranatha Bible Conference in Muskegon.
Ah, yeah.
And so we interviewed him there, and I had just started going to some of their writers' seminars.
Okay.
And so I was starting to learn about writing and publishing books. But I'd already published Revolution Against Evolution and learned all about typesetting, and it was kind of a interesting experience.
Yeah, we kept the name of that book for this TV show,
right?
And we've had it all these years. It's been pretty much our. You got into the website stuff very early on and got a very good domain name for it, you know.
Right.
RAE.org, man. You can't beat that.
Yeah, I said we got a TLA, a three-lettered acronym.
A three-letter acronym. That's right. That's pretty unusual these days. So, and you got, because you did that very early on, right? It wasn't how soon after we did launch the TV show?
Well, it was 1995 where we launched the website.
Okay. Yeah.
Of course, that was quite a whole lot more primitive than it is now.
Well, everything.
I think right now I'm in the midst of yet another website redesign.
Yeah.
The WordPress is starting to get kind of junky, so we're going into a new platform called Wix.
Wix?
W-I-X.
W-I-X, okay. Anyway, the long and short, I mean, over the year, we've done this is our 1,000th show, and every subject, you can imagine pretty much it deals with the topic of creation evolution, plus some little peripheral ones we've had fun over the years. But, Doug, I mean, we've dealt with, obviously, biology, we've dealt with paleontology, we've done with geology, we've studied microbiology, astronomy, we've done things with education. I'm just trying to get the subject matter. If there's any subject matter that we have not covered over the 1,000 shows, I can't think of one.
French fashion.
French fashion? Well, that has its own evolutionary scenario, I suppose. But that probably would be something we have not dealt with, and probably will never deal with it. But
well, unless I get my new wife Cookie on the show, maybe.
Then you might have. Okay, that may be a whole different thing. But we've talked about dinosaurs, extinctions. We've talked about the difference between macroevolution and microevolution. We've talked about long age scenarios, why they're important to the argument of creation. Long age and young Earth scenarios. I don't know. There's just what we found out in doing this TV show and things like this. People who do these kinds of things, you have to be somewhat of a generalist. And the advantage, like you said, we've interviewed people like Dr. Bliss. We've interviewed Russ Humphreys, who was an astrophysicist. Well, I don't know, physicist. What kind of astrophysicist? But he wasn't. Technically, that was not what he was.
He's a cosmologist.
Cosmologist. That's what he is, as far as now. But he gives Starlight and Time books. We've interviewed Dr. Henry Morris. We both talked to John Morris. We're not trying to do this to name drop, just that the creations have been very open and accessible, because you have to be somewhat of a generalist, but you need to talk to people who are specialists because they know more than you do. Mm-hmm. And we open up, we want to create a platform. People say, why do you deal with the subject over the years? And it's to remove obstacles to faith, to be honest with you. I'm not going to try to prove Christianity or belief in the Bible or even young Earth creationism just by throwing it out there. But we want to remove obstacles you may have. You may have a heart that's looking and searching and want to see that there is a God who is overall, who sets the rules, who makes things make sense. Okay, gives us a reason for us being here, how we got here, why we're here, where we're going to go. All these things are important issues, but they're pretty much out there. And so the creation evolution is one where a lot of people fall down on. I remember years ago, my own sisters asked me, "Why do you study this subject so much?" And then she ran into like 4 or 5 evolutionists who lost their faith or were struggling with faith because of this very issue. It's a very difficult issue. The church ignores it a lot because they're afraid of it, because they don't think they know enough. And sometimes they don't, but the only way to learn is to ask questions and admit you don't know. It's okay not to know. We don't know everything there is about it. We've done 1,000 shows, and there's still stuff I go, wow, I didn't get that. I mean, Doug's caught me many times. I'll say something, I think something's right, and boy, it's way off the mark, because I'm a talker. He's a thinker, No, I think too. But the point of it is that, I didn't understand the difference. For instance, remember, Doug, when we talked to Russ Humphreys, and I didn't really understand the difference between a magnetic field and gravity. I didn't really understand the difference between that. It was they're totally different things. I didn't understand something, and it's okay to ask questions. You're going to have them, but the biblical record is really good, and our shows have shown over the years. There's been people. We keep saying, well, maybe we'll stop doing it now, and then we'll get 3 or 4 people coming up and say, hey, man, I just saw your show last week. That really meant a lot to me. Or it's happened over and over again, right? When we're ready to maybe call it a day, and the Lord gives us, nope, you're not quite done yet. So we are here to remove obstacles to faith. That's to me the biggest thing. We're not going to try to prove something, but if we can remove some obstacles, and that helps in a small way or even a big way, then we've done what our mission was set out to do, right?
What's interesting is that lately, I've had a lot of changes in my life.
Yeah, a lot.
I ended up buying the house that was next door to my daughter in Grand Rapids, and then a couple of years later, after we rented it out for a while, I decided, well, I'm going to move into this house. Well, that totally disrupted my life. I found.
Well, your life was already totally disrupted. You had a wife of 50 years who passed away. Okay, yeah. And then in the meantime, he's moving up. But he gets married.
Yeah, right.
You don't do anything half-hearted. You just boom, let's go, let's jump in the pool, man. Mm-hmm. Everybody into the water. That's Doug. He's jumping in, and here's a guy. If you just look at him, sometimes you think, Mr. Stodgy guy. Oh yeah, he fools you. He'll fool you. He really has things going on, and he does a lot of things. He's not afraid to jump and move and take action, and I think that's.
What's interesting is that I saw a fellow just down the street from me who had a little square dance sign on his door of his van.
Yeah.
And so I went over, talked with him, and asked him, well, where do you do square dancing here? And so I had been a square dancer all my life because of my dad, and so he was a caller, and so my previous wife Vivian, she and I did the square dance in Grand Ledge. Well, I ended up going to the square dance club that he recommended, and then I met a couple of ladies who was going to get a group of people to go down to Grand Ledge, and so I decided we'll go with them and see what that was all about. And in another group that came to that dance was Cookie, and Cookie, the one thing led to another, and after a few months of meeting up at the square dance, we started dating, and then we just found out that we had so many things in common.
Pretty compatible. Yep.
Yeah, we ended up getting married, and so we've spent the last 7 or 8 months in married happiness, and I think that's a God thing. It's to see all the different circumstances that occurred. And I also met some people in my neighborhood who were Christians, and they meet at the local restaurant for Bible study every Tuesday morning.
So you keep me active. So so Doug moved out of the Lansing area. But we're in Lansing at my house. But Doug, it's the year 2025. It's hard to believe. 1993 we started this show.
Right. Yeah.
And everyone, if you live long enough, you're going to have experiences, life things. You're going to have tragedies, joys, sorrows. But in the meantime, it's amazing how things, Lord, that we've, the things the Lord has done to help us focus, can keep us on track despite ups and downs of life. And I think the show has been one of those things that have helped. Doug, it's been been a joy. I mean, I married his sister years and years ago, and I had a tragedy with her as well during the middle of this thing, and she was injured very severely in the hospital. Now she's still alive, but she's not able to do really anything at this point in time except let me know that she's here when she's not happy. I know she's actually still here, but through all these things, the Lord is faithful and He's good, and He keeps us on track. And one of the things I found out, Doug, is I told people ask you, why do you study things like creation evolution? They serve like anchors when I'm climbing the mountain. Mm-hmm. If I have a stumble or a tragedy or something that happens to me, I have these spiritual pitons. I pound them in the side of the mountain. I may fall 15 feet, but I'm not going to fall 2,000 to my death. It holds me up. These kinds of things do help people. It's why people spend time on it. It's worthwhile. It's worthwhile to focus in on things like that. It's not about you. It's about Him. So how do you need to learn more about Him, and it'll help you.
It's good to seek a personal relationship with this God in heaven. And learn about Jesus Christ, because He is the one. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man can come to the Father but by me. So ask Him if He is real and if He is actually true. And He has certain requirements. He says, come to me, I will no wise cast you out. But seek a personal relationship, and it's that personal relationship that will prove beyond the shadow of a doubt in your own mind that He is real and that His ways are right and true, and it does change your whole worldview. You get away from this. You may have your truth, but somebody else may have a different truth, and the truth is not dependent. Truth is fact.
It's not based on consensus. It's based on reality.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed our little history lesson. I think that we have really had a lot of fun over the past 32 years doing this.
Yes, a long time.
And I appreciate you, Rich, for sticking with me all this time.
Well, it's feelings mutual. Amen.
Well, we'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.